What is up, my friends, and welcome to another edition of the XFL Weekend Review. I'm your host, Mark Perry, and you just heard from Colin Cowherd on the announcement of the USFL team names, cities, and logos. We'll see how this comes out on the stream because there could be an issue with that playing that clip. I figured I'd give it a shot. That's the big news this week. Plus, we've got Mike Mitchell's Can the XFL and USFL Coexist? We have that as well coming up on the show. What's up, my friends? Welcome. Huge alt football news today. We'll get into that fully, plus your reaction to the USFL team names, the cities, and logos as we go along in the show, at the end of the show for our friends on chat and everything like that. So how do you want to get in touch with the show? It's simple. You email podcast at xflnewshub.com with your thoughts, or record an MP3 or a video on your phone, and we'll play it on next week's show. Please, please, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We'll read it on the show. Stitcher, we're on Stitcher, Audible, Player FM. I think Facebook has podcasts now. Google Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review there. And remember, you can watch the show, XFL Weekend Review, live at 8 p.m. Eastern every Monday on the YouTubes, Facebook, and Twitch as well. So big news today. We'll get into all that, your reaction, my reaction to it. I mean, this just kind of came out of nowhere. All of a sudden, it was like, oh, Colin Cowherd is going to have talk USFL. That was on the morning. There was a teaser message that went out actually during football, which was a good idea, I guess. Perfect timing. The interesting thing about the USFL and the USFL is that it's a Fox Sports owned thing. So I have yet to see if ESPN. I haven't seen anything from ESPN. I've seen something from CBS Sports when it comes to the USFL, but that's it. It's an interesting little paradigm that this spring football stuff has going on for it with the USFL. We'll get into that. So, but yes, we are still an XFL podcast. I don't know what's going to happen with the USFL. XFL still got their stuff going on behind the scenes. Let's get into it. My friends, what's up to my friends in chat room? Daniel's in there. Astro is in there. We'll get into their messages as well as people on the Facebook and the Twitch. So without further ado, I guess we'll get into the week that was the USFL. All right, here is your USFL, 8 teams, logos, cities, everything from today's announcement on the Herd with Colin Cowherd. Fox Sports FS1, which owns the USFL. Remember, Fox News has nothing to do with it. Rupert Murdoch and Fox News is a separate entity from the regular Big Fox. But we have the 8 teams. We have 2 divisions. First, the North Division, and then we have the South Division. So your North Division teams are the Michigan Panthers, New Jersey Generals, Philadelphia Stars, and Pittsburgh Maulers. Interesting to say here. I mean, New Jersey Generals, New York, but no franchise per se that is stepping on any XFL toes. In the South Division, Birmingham Stallions, no surprise there. Houston Gamblers, that's XFL Roughnecks territory. New Orleans gets a team, the Breakers, and another team, the Tampa Bay Bandits, now move into XFL territory with their franchise. And if I were to pick personally, my favorite from all the logos is the Tampa Bay Bandits. I think is my favorite. Let us know what you think in the comments. Also, according to Ben Fisher, the location of the first season will be announced shortly. Quote, Fox Sports said it would announce the location of the first season's games shortly. Well, we know, we've been reporting about it, you've heard about it, that Protective Stadium in Birmingham, Alabama will be the home of the USFL's first and second season, with the first season all 8 teams playing there. Season 2, 4 of the teams supposedly will go to their home locations, but then the other cities will have the hub. And then in the third season, all the three franchises will be in their home areas. Kickoff is set for Friday, April 15th, 2022. That's your names and teams, at least in the first three seasons. I don't think they'll add anything to it. I wouldn't do that if I was them. In the USFL. Other news that broke last week, Daryl Johnston, Mike Pereira, you've heard of them. Well, the Fox Sports announced who is doing things behind the scenes for the USFL. So Fox Sports CEO and executive producer Eric Shanks will serve as chairman. Brian Woods, we've heard his name, the former CEO. And notice, interesting, they said former CEO of the Spring League, so I guess the Spring League is no more. He will become president of football operations. Edward Hartman, he'll be the executive vice president of business operations. Daryl Johnston, former XFL guy. He is the executive vice president of football operations. And Mike Pereira will be the head of officiating. Quote, Fox Sports will announce that the new league was constituted and kick off in April. Johnston is the second former XFL employee, now part of the new USFL. We assume he won't be the last. Former Roughnecks team president Brian Michael Cooper is part of the USFL's legal team. And Johnston was the director of player personnel for the Dallas Renegades. He was also part of the AAF. So also, it seems like the Spring League is no more, as this is full-on USFL, and there's no room to do a Spring League. Now, when are the games going to be announced? When are the games going to happen? We said April 15th was the time, but now we also learned in Fox Sports' announcement this past week that games will be on Saturday and Sundays, but sometimes Fridays and Mondays as well. So they had a whole breakdown of all the things in the news going on with the USFL. Quote, there will be 8 teams in this North and South Division. Each team will play a 10-game schedule with teams in the same division playing each other twice and teams in the other divisions playing each other once. Locations for the games was not part of the announcement, but we know Birmingham will be the location. That will be the hub city. The USFL regular season will begin mid-April. We're talking about April 15th, and run through mid-June, followed by the playoffs. So you got April, May, June, and basically almost into July. You will have USFL games. Spring football is back in the United States. Something new we did learn with this announcement is that USFL games will be played on Saturdays and Sundays, just like the XFL did. However, there could be some, quote, special broadcasts on specific Fridays and Mondays. Perfect time to do something like that during the summer and that spring into summer months. I think that's a great call. Quote, we are extremely fortunate to have this extraordinary executive team of experienced executives to guide the new USFL's development as we move toward launch this spring, said Fox Sports CEO and executive producer Eric Shanks, who will serve as chairman of the USFL's board of directors. So now we have people behind the scenes. Now we have the date games going to be played. We have team names and the logos. Next up, we would assume shortly, I wonder, I mean, if I were them, I would try to get that out potentially as a water cooler topic and things that they could even talk about on Thursday during the NFL games, to get that Birmingham, Alabama announcement out there before Thanksgiving. Now, if you go to the USFL's website, the shop is still not all cranked up with all the new team names and logos. Hopefully, they'll get that a little organized as we get towards Black Friday. You would assume, hey man, make some money off of your new merchandise. So let us know what you think in the comments of the new USFL's 8 teams, their logos, and all this USFL news. Are you excited? Are you ready for some USFL football before we kind of wait to get into the XFL season? It's going to be an interesting spring, my friends. XFL Super Insider, our main man, Mike Mitchell, posted this article. Can the XFL and USFL coexist in the same space? He put this out. This was before the big announcement of the team names, et cetera, et cetera. So we all know that the proposed leagues either failed to launch or taken down by ineptitude or circumstances beyond their control. So there's no guarantee that two pro football leagues, the XFL and USFL, will be around playing games at the same time in 2023, but they might. And once upon a time in a galaxy not too far away, it almost happened. You remember the XFL versus the AAF in 2020. Well, now we have that back. It was the AAF that was racing to try to get their product out there for all to see, and making all these partnerships. Didn't really have any money. That was the main problem. But the Alliance wanted to get out there before the XFL. Now, fast forward, this mad dash happens again in a little different circumstances. The USFL is now pushing to get out there before the XFL launches in 2023. Sound familiar? Clearly, lots of different circumstances from the AAF and the USFL. AAF didn't have any money. USFL's got money and Fox. The AAF was on CBS, TNT, and the NFL Network, versus XFL was on Fox, ESPN, and ABC. AAF was paying to be on those channels versus the XFL shared the television networks covered the cost, and the XFL was able to get the gate revenue. And I don't know how they split up the advertising thing, but the XFL did not have a TV deal where they were making money, and the AAF was essentially paying to be on television. And now with Fox, the Fox partnership, the USFL doesn't have to pay anybody, saving a ton of money. Plus the difference between the AAF and the USFL, they're playing in a hub city. Let it germinate a little bit. Get fans get interested, get advertisers interested, but maybe potentially team owners interested. This is a different approach to spring football than we've seen before. But remember, the XFL hasn't played, and the Spring League has played. They played last year, and Mike gets into that in a little bit. So we all know the demise of the AAF. Now we have the USFL's arrival. Now we know that, of course, Fox Sports basically owns the whole thing. We know that the birth of the current USFL all started with the XFL and Brian Wood's Spring League working together back in 2019. Fox's introduction and reinvigoration in the concept of a pro football league during an NFL offseason started with their introduction to TSL and their collaboration with the XFL. Remember, the USFL wouldn't be here if it wasn't for XFL and Fox. The Spring League's Brian Wood's creation, which aired games on Fox networks the last couple of years, has faded into the shadows. Fox initially came on as a minority owner of the TSL, but off the heels of what the XFL did on Fox and the meager numbers TSL did this past spring, Fox Sports, led by Eric Shanks, has decided to take the plunge head first. Brian Woods remains. We all know all the different players involved. It's expected that Joe Klatt and Brock Heward will be part of the USFL as well. Some of the rumored names for head coaching positions in the United States Football League are former Houston Roughnecks head coach June Jones, Steve Spurrier, he could maybe hit down to Tampa, Hal Mummy did great, and Jerry Glanville, all potential names. I would not be surprised if they didn't jump ship or go to that. I mean, y'all got to get paid. The interesting thing is that what does that leave the XFL and their head coaches? So XFL needs to make some moves to bring in these head coaches. I mean, if the XFL is thinking wants to bring June Jones back to the Houston Roughnecks, they need to jump on that now, because he could be with the Houston Gamblers and be out. Remember that Roughnecks were one of the most exciting teams. P.J. Walker, Cam Phillips, great defense. Is there going to be a little competition? There would have been no competition for these coaches if it was just the XFL returning in 2023. Now there is, so it's something that we'll have to keep an eye on. This is the question that was raised in the article at XFL News Hub very early this year. Quite frankly, is it's the goal of Fox. Much like the AAF attempted to, the USFL saw the viability of what the XFL produced in 2020, and not only did they want in again, but they wanted to take complete control by cutting out the middleman. It's what Brian Woods and TSL afforded to Fox that the current leadership of the XFL wouldn't. An opportunity for a major sports network to own and operate its own league. This is new. The USFL has a chance, if run correctly, of course, to pose a more significant threat to the XFL than the AAF did, simply because the alliance was paying to be on the networks. Their house was made out of straws. The USFL is run by a robust network in the sports industry. Fox's house is one of the strongest on the planet. The bottom line is with all these entities is how all in are you really? Because as anyone knows who's followed this closely, it takes a lot of patience, serious financing to operate a pro football league. And, executives come and go. One of these guys gets ousted and replaced by somebody else. The USFL could just collapse right then on the spot. So first, to cut down the costs, they are doing the hub setting. Secondly, to buy the league time because it's not ready to go into individual markets yet, so they do the hub thing. And lastly, and most importantly, to showcase the league so the USFL can get owners and sponsors to buy into their teams, which is a kind of an interesting thing. Let's put the product out there first on a very low-level scale, see if we can get interest and excitement in these local cities, and then start to drum up support and slowly build. Brian Woods had said from the beginning when he was on the XFL MarcCast, a slow build is the way to go versus jumping all out with guns firing like the XFL did in 2.0 era and looking like they're doing in the 3.0 area as well. Fox is earmarked to spend anywhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 150 mil the first couple of years. We're here in 3 years, 150 million. That's $50 million a year. Quite frankly, it's a strategy that can work if Fox is willing to pay their players and coaches respectable salaries, and if they're prepared to take losses. Having a willing partner in the city of Birmingham to help offset costs helps, and there's no denying that football players will see Fox as a great showcase if marketed and promoted correctly. I'm really curious to see what happens after the CFL season, if a lot of these guys potentially will come back down south and play in the USFL to get that kind of game tape and action in the USFL. But actions will speak louder than words. False promises are something that the public and football community experienced firsthand with the AAF and who sold the world a bill of goods and then failed to deliver. Part of me getting the vibe, yes, there was a lot of interest in the USFL's announcement today. There could be some residual getting burned with the AAF and with the XFL having to shut its doors due to what, that could potentially have people hold off the excitement now and really wait until there's players and coaches, and maybe even waiting until after a couple games are played and live in Birmingham, Alabama in April. And that's why maybe they're going with the slow build. Plus, what is still out there, so having to manage and mitigate that, I would assume it makes it easier being in a hub city to deal with that as well. So where does the XFL stand in all of this? With the USFL directly standing in their path, well, we know the XFL is run by Redbird Capital Partners, Danny Garcia and Dwayne Johnson, and they have grand plans of their own. They have set up their own executive team for the league, and the knowledge is that they are planning on making big announcements on the league's direction, with 2022 serving as a rampway towards 2023. You can read all about those plans. Mike Mitchell has talked about those extensively. The XFL plans on being in specific markets in 2023, some of the same from 2020, but with little changes. The USFL could decide to avoid XFL markets or go to war directly by driving into the same cities the XFL inhabited a year ago. A declaration of war could, but potentially a business strategy could backfire. And Mike Mitchell updated that they released their team names, and Tampa Bay Bandits, Houston Gamblers, and New Jersey Generals are setting up shop in 2020 XFL markets. That provides the XFL ends up back in Tampa, Houston, and the tri-state area in 2023. So we've seen that before. Mike Mitchell has updated this article. So for now, the USFL has a timetable of that mid-April to June for kickoff. Where the XFL lands in, that could be different. The XFL might do late February and perhaps late April. Maybe who knows where the XFL is thinking. I think the XFL is just going at their own way and doesn't care what the USFL does. But now they're both competing with players. So once upon a time, the AAF was offering their players multiple-year contracts to try and prevent them from jumping ship to the XFL. It would have created an interesting battle in the courts if players decided to play for the XFL instead, but that potential legal crisis was averted when the AAF was no more. But looks like the USFL will most certainly be in action when the XFL returns because they're backed by Fox. The USFL could try to take the same tack with their coaches and players. At the end of the day, the league that pays more will get the best available players and coaches. If the checks bounce, the employees will too. But the problem lies in, spring football has never been able to survive more than 3 seasons. And now if you have 2 leagues going at the same time, that really hinders things. We'll have to see with that. But no more sweatshop football. The Spring League got away with murder by not only having players play for free, but some paying fees to put their bodies on the line in multiple games. That kind of malpractice will not fly, of course, under the Fox banner, and it shouldn't. This is Mike Mitchell. According to sources involved in the TSL, some of the players who were promised financial compensation for competing in the TSL have still not received payment since the spring. That in itself could hurt the USFL because players talk and players know, and some of these guys might be like, well, you know what? But it is financed by Fox, but Fox was there before with the TSL last year, so it wasn't like they're on their own. That's going to be an interesting thing when it comes to the USFL and what kind of players they get. They will get good talent and they will get good players. The Spring League put on great games. McLeod Bethel Thompson is in the CFL now, and he's now the starter. I think he played in the TSL. A bunch of guys played in the TSL or were on NFL rosters and CFL rosters, so that's not a problem. But this problem that the Spring League had, we'll see how that kind of fares with the USFL in 2022. And how is this all going to play for the XFL? The one thing that interests me is that the USFL has set up shop in Tampa and Houston. Does that mean that the Vipers are moving to Orlando and the Houston Roughnecks will be in San Antonio? Or is the XFL going to go head-to-head in these markets? Or, part 3, did both sides already know where they were planting teams and are not going to go head-to-head? Because clearly The Rock and Danny Garcia, Redbird Capital, have worked with, and the people involved in Redbird have worked with Fox. If they said, hey, let's just not be in the same markets, and maybe if the USFL season is good and that XFL season is good, maybe down the road, because we're not overlapping in any cities, maybe we can merge. And instead of us having 8 teams and 8 teams, we would have 16 teams. Or do what the XFL wanted to do with the CFL and have these 2 leagues play, but eventually they have a championship game and they play the 2 top teams, the top team in the USFL and the top team in the XFL. Something that no one else has talked about. We will have to find out. But Danny and The Rock are creative, and they're willing to come up with any ideas to generate interest. And that's certainly the USFL champion versus the XFL champion could be some interesting. That would be a fun game for spring football fans to watch. All right, we'll take a commercial break. We'll be back with your social media stuff right after this. Stay tuned, my friends.
This week on the MarcCast, the USFL is in business, but there's a different owner. We're going to break down what this means for former owner Brian Woods, who's still on the team.
Yeah, we have an exciting interview with prolific USFL author Jeff Pearlman. Jeff has some hot takes. I'm excited. We break down all the big announcements from Fox Sports, the press release, all the details you need to know. Some of the stuff we already knew, some of the stuff we know that they haven't announced yet, but we'll kind of get to all that.
It almost feels like if you and I were like, we should make a new USFL. And you're like, that's a great idea. And I'm like, I'm going to put out a press release. And you're like, do it. And I'm just going to use a Microsoft Word and I'm going to put out a press release. And maybe there'll be a few misspellings and I'll have commas in the wrong places. And people are like, oh, this is awesome, the USFL. I don't know. I hope I'm wrong. It seems like it'd be kind of a fun idea, I guess. I don't know. I don't feel that optimistic about this. Just being honest, I really don't.
Also, we're in the middle of playoff positioning. Just a couple teams figuring out where they're going to go. It's either going to be Hamilton hosting Montreal or Montreal hosting Hamilton, depending on how everything shakes out this weekend with those games. We'll discuss that. We'll discuss what's happening Grey Cup weekend. It's coming up really soon. We're only a few weeks away.
Yeah, we have a couple great CFL interviews. We have Dave Dawson with Sports Spectrum.
This is the time right now where you are seeing the absolute character of the teams come out. Who each team really is has finally come to fruition.
We have Aaron Koronek with TSN Edge and TSN 1050 Toronto. We do a little CFL fantasy talk, a little C218 sports betting, kind of all that stuff.
His league signed a gambling partner, and I don't really know. I haven't been ultimately very impressed with the partnership as a whole. I don't think they've done a very good job of executing.
And then, Paul, I'm really happy. I feel like we had a really wholehearted debate about the XFL, about the NFL, about does the XFL need a development system with the NFL, talking about a partnership that way. And then I think we got heated about a lot of stuff. This was, I think, the longest we've recorded non-interviewee in a long time. So it's good.
Right. Like when we first started the podcast, about an hour long without interviews, and now we got interviews, and we went long today because we're really passionate about a lot of stuff. We hope you'll tune in. It's one of our better episodes, and it's all happening YouTube or wherever you get your audio podcasts.
Put on your microphone, Mr. Mark. Someday, hopefully this year, we'll have a nice producers, and like as XFL News Hub grows with these two leagues, then this will be a lot cleaner show. But I think some of you guys like the sloppiness of this show. What's up? Isaiah says, wow, the logos are great. Nah, they're okay. I'm not really a super fan. Julian says, I'm pumped for the USFL to don't have to move to a fall schedule. Yeah, that no one's going to take on the NFL. Nick says, go Maulers, baby. I will have my official team next week. I already know what it is, but I'm not telling you. My official team, I have to clear it with the wife first because I'm good like that. And if she agrees, and I think she will, we'll have my official team next week on the show. Jose says, I wish they would have avoided NFL cities. No. The reason why they put this in NFL cities is because they have a fan base. Because you're a Jets fan doesn't mean you'll never watch football ever again, and that's the only team you'll watch. Jet fans and Giant fans, even if you got 20% of them to watch your USFL team, that's a lot of people. Plus, it's major markets, and major markets have major advertisers. So you got to get in those big markets first. Then you can get to these other markets. Yes, the other teams can sell more, but you need those locations. You notice the USFL has basically could care less about the East Coast, or I'm sorry, the West Coast. I mean, there is nothing. There's no San Antonio. There's not, Las Vegas. There's not, Seattle. There's not California. There's nothing out there. They're kind of hanging in this area, this neck of the woods, which I thought also is kind of interesting, as I like to say. You should drink every time I say interesting. Alfred says, I wonder what coaches will be hired. Territorial draft, I wonder. All interesting things. You just heard Mike Mitchell talking about possibly June Jones and Hal Mummy and Steve Spurrier's names out there. If I'm the XFL, I got to jump on that. I got to jump and get some of these guys and sign them up now. We will see how that turns out. It's going to be, we had, what hit. Everything went down, and it was terrible. And then The Rock and Danny Garcia come in and buy the XFL. That was huge. We were all excited. Then we had the CFL talk, and then that fell away, and then we didn't hear anything, and then Jeffrey Pollack leaves, and then there's nothing. This 2022 season and 2023 is a make or break 2 years if spring football will work. Because if this doesn't work, if the USFL can't get it going on and the XFL can't get it going on, no one's getting spring football going on. Like, this is it. This is not going to happen again, potentially in another 10 to 20 years, if these two entities can't get this thing going. Richard says, I'm happy for the USFL, but I don't like the bubble. Remember, I'm not a super fan of the bubble either. You're not going to be able to buy season tickets. At least now, if you're in Tampa or you're in Houston, you can, but they're not even going to sell season tickets this year. Who in the chat, or is any of you guys in the chat, if you're hardcore, are you actually going to go down to Alabama to go see a game? I've said, and I've already talked to my wife, that May looks like the month that we're going to head down to Alabama and check out a couple USFL games. Maybe even do a show down there. I don't know what the plans are, but that's something that I'm looking to doing and checking out. Jared says, players will go to the XFL since they paid them after it was all over. Very noble of them. True as well. Greg says, your team will be the Birmingham Stallions. It's mine. Greg, no. I will tell you this. It is not the Stallions. And Jose says, hopefully San Antonio can get an XFL team. I have a feeling if I was a betting man, based on Tampa and Houston getting USFL teams, I really think that Orlando is going to be the Vipers and the Roughnecks is going to be in San Antonio. Why? Remember, Dallas Renegades had their own stadium. Houston Roughnecks were playing at a college. They can move the Roughnecks to San Antonio, and they'll have their own home professional field and not be playing at a college. Even though that Houston connection was with Oliver Luck is gone now. So we will see. It's going to be very fascinating to watch all this stuff. Are you excited? I am super excited. All right, my friends, let's get to some of your social media stuff, shall we? First up, we've got to check out the Facebook's reaction to the USFL teams and logos. John says, until Michigan needs to rename the team, Tal says, let's go Generals. That's right. We did report on XFL News Hub about the NFL's Carolina Panthers having an issue with the Michigan team. Why don't you call them, I don't know, the Michigan Kitty Cats? The Michigan PJ Walkers instead of the Panthers. Why didn't he play? We could have had PJ Walker against Taylor Heineke. Battle of XFL quarterbacks. Great storyline, but no. No. Cam Newton returns. About Fox Sports dropping a major announcement today. Tommy says, why would Philadelphia want anything that resembles the Cowboys logo? And Tom says, the Stars were already franchised back in the 80s. There you go. That's why. Fox announces the USFL returns in the games on Saturdays and Sundays. We talked about that. Michael says all the games to be played in the same city. They have already failed. They're doing it to save money, Michael. They're doing it to save money, my friend. Wayne says it won't ever fly without having fantasy football involved. 100%, Wayne. And we will have fantasy football. Hopefully, I don't know. I'm so overworked with stuff, trying to get things going. But I would love to do USFL fantasy football on our site. I wanted to do it for the CFL. I could not find the time to write the code. It would take me a month or two to kind of really hammer it out. And I just not had the time to do it. We'll see how that goes in the next couple months. He says, I know it sounds crazy, but people will watch if they're invested. You got to pump money into advertising, and in those advertisements, you must include past players like in the USFL, such as Flutie, Kelly, Steve Young, etc. We're back to give the league validity. I hope they crush the NFL. They won't crush the NFL because the NFL plays in the fall. Craig says, I'd like to see that Friday and Monday night game as well as the weekends to maximize exposure, and it's in the spring. Love some spring football. Yeah, what am I going to do about this podcast? Well, we'll have to do it before the game, I guess, which will be a lot of fun. Timo says, both are glorified minor leagues to the NFL. Well, yeah. Tony says, I hope Baltimore gets a team. They could use M&T Bank Stadium. Last time the USFL was in Baltimore, 33rd Street was still in business, Memorial Stadium. That is true there. About Johnston and Mike Pereira being part of the team, Gary says good hires. Pereira was part. They were both part of the AAF. Somebody took issue with those type of hirings, and Moose Johnson. We have an article up there where he kind of talked about that and said, football needs to be good first. And the other's point was you need to have good businessmen first. And yeah, the AAF football was fine. It was the business part, and that's the part, the business people. And that's what I'm not sure they have. I mean, as far as football business minds goes, I would give that notch to the XFL over the Fox. The executive producer is the chairman of the league. Isn't he a little busy working on other stuff? Can the XFL and USFL coexist? Mike Mitchell's article. Dan says, honestly, merge the USFL, XFL, and CFL into one league. And Mark says, no. I agree with the merge point that you're making. I think my conspiracy theory hat type person, you know me, and I'm just doing it for fun. It will all depend on what happens with the XFL teams. Now, if the XFL puts a team in Houston and the XFL puts a team in Tampa, then there's no way that they're going to merge, that they're going head to head, and this is a straight up battle. Notice that they called them the New Jersey Generals, not the New York Generals, because the New York Guardians would be the New York Guardians. They didn't call them the New York Generals. Just something to point out. I think the USFL and XFL have talked, and they don't want to go head to head in the same cities. So the XFL will be, the Vipers will be in Orlando. The Roughnecks will be in San Antonio. And I probably would say the Wildcats might be in San Diego. That would be my take. Just get out of Los Angeles. You don't need to be in LA. It's not a good sports town. Not a good sports town. And in this day and age, do you really need that, Mark? I don't know. Not a good sports town, in my opinion. On to the Instagrams. Give us rate the USFL logo. Teams best and worst. Which team has the best? Which team has the worst? Zach says definitely between Tampa Bay and Pittsburgh. I'm with you. I'm with you there. I just wish the New Orleans would have gone something a little bit more fresh than Breakers, though. Yeah. I don't like New Orleans doesn't seem to be like a surf town. Like to me that would be like San Diego Breakers. That Zach be good. Fred GMZ _ 1776. Honestly, when these teams leave Birmingham, are going to find a hard place to play. Okay. Angel Durant 12 says, I don't know, man. The name, logos, and colors look very outdated. It had a 70s vibe to them. When the XFL came back in 2020, they mainly had new cities and new logos. It worked. I wonder why the USFL didn't do the same. And Target Walm says Bandits by far. I'm going to have to go with that one as well. I think Bandits is my favorite. I want to say my least favorite is the Stars or the Generals. But I know that's from the past, so you want to use those. But you can still use that structure, but have a little fun with it, no? I mean, you could still do that. Just spruce it up a little bit. That's all I'm asking for, friends. That's all I'm asking for. Let's get to some Twitter, folks. Hanging out with some our friends on Twitter. On the social media stuff. Rating these teams. Hail Hydra. Marvel Universe person. Denzilville Vance Scar on Twitter says, how will Tampa and Houston teams affect the XFL? And I think that's a great question. And I think what is going to happen is they're not going to go head to head because I believe that they could leave the door open for a merger. Could you imagine that the XFL, for example, does their big video stuff leading up to the XFL season. Fox and USFL does their little thing, just we're putting some money into it, but not a lot. The XFL does this grand thing, this lead up to the XFL season, this big kind of, excitement. Watching this show is getting people pumped up, and, the behind the scenes thing. Hopefully XFL News Hub is part of whatever they're planning on doing. Then the league comes out and there's everything going on. And then a full season of whatever behind the scenes XFL is the negotiations of these two leagues merging together. I think if they go head to head, so if you have, I would assume 2022 USFL plays. 2023 XFL comes in, USFL plays, and they stay separate. Or based off of the USFL's success after the season, there might be a championship game between the two leagues. That would probably be in 2024. And then maybe at some point there would be a merger along those ways. Who knows? But you notice the XFL is East and West, and the USFL, that's another thing I just thought of now. The XFL is East and West. The USFL is North and South. Coincidence? Think about it, my friends. What do you think in the chat? Am I onto something? Am I being crazy? Vince De La Cruz at El Chorizo 88 says, so Vegas could be opted for a team in any sport and call themselves the Gamblers. This is true. Would the casinos sue them? You're not allowed to call gamblers because we do gambling here. It's going to confuse the public. Corey Nash, my name is Nash at Twitter, says, best logo, Stallions? Yes. Worst logos, Generals. Looks like the emblem from the USSR. Oh my goodness. Kind of does. Kind of does. At MM_13_, he says New Jersey has the best. Meh. I don't know about that. At Kenny Brown 131 about Mike Mitchell talking about the USFL logos. He says it's great news, but I do have doubt as to the need for 8 teams playing in Alabama. Yes, it gives 4 games a week over 10 weeks, but the cost will be considerable. Fox Sports must have deep pockets, as I can't see viewing figures alone keeping it afloat. It will cut. Mike Mitchell says it will cut costs for sure, but the whole idea of the sub hub for 8 teams is to cut down. Remember, there's travel, facilities, insurance, 8 different venue agreements, expanded individual team personnel. That can be slated to the next step. And that's going to take some serious funding. So that's a great point by Mike Mitchell. At Pudge 301219, it sucks not seeing a team in St. Louis, but I don't see any trash talking about it. I'm hoping for a potential partnership to provide a bigger league and valuable alternative to the NFL. I'm just saying, I think that's potentially out there. Let's see here. Let's go to the next one. Deshaun Static says there's hundreds of Division I football schools, football players that go undrafted every year, and hundreds that don't make a final roster at the end of a preseason. Hundreds of Division II players that never get a chance to try football at the NFL level. Talent available ain't an issue. That's true. Getting talent, even for both leagues, to me is not an issue. And we'll be able to see the nice thing about these two leagues is, you're going to get some of the CFL guys that played in the XFL coming back. But you could have Jordan Ta'amu on one team, playing. Maybe he would have been the backup on another. So it will definitely get these guys a lot of playing time in the future. And we will see how things go for both leagues. I'm super excited. I know Alabama is the next announcement. Then after that, I want to hear about coaches and a draft. Those are the big things, coaches and a draft. On to the YouTubes, my friends. We'll get to some YouTube. Spartacus Jones said the XFL and USFL should merge under the banner of Pro Spring Football, with each 8-team league playing under its own banner, the XFL and USFL with a common draft and a limited interleague schedule, maybe 4 games out of the 14 schedule, a championship called the 4th of July Bowl. The first such meeting on July 4th, 2023, and stay in the spring, of course. 3 AFLs, the AAFC, the WFL, and the USFL switching to the fall, and the UFL all crashed and burned competing with the fall. Yeah, no one's competing with the NFL in the fall. That would be super dumb. That would be super dumb. That's not going to happen. So don't worry about that. James says, I like the change when it comes to the XFL, but I really hope that it stays true to what made people love it in 2020. Do not partner with any other football league. Just do your own thing. There's a market for spring football as long as you make the league exciting and interesting. The play on the field is quality. It would be amazing to see some new host cities. But please, if anyone in the XFL happens to see this, bring back the Battlehawks. Oh, there's no doubt. Theodore King says, I think the XFL should forget about Seattle and Los Angeles. Let the USFL have LA. The CFL have Seattle. USFL might be taking Houston, unfortunately, so San Antonio might be a great alternative. Put a team in Chicago. I don't agree with Seattle. Got to keep that Seattle thing. USFL 8589 Leash says, USFL and XFL should play their championship game set on July 4th week, and it should be called the Independence Bowl. Branding 2 leagues with a total of 16 teams, each with 8 teams each, keeping the team names in the XFL and the choice of any of the 16 teams that the USFL currently has the rights to. I haven't seen these. I haven't seen this stuff until now. I don't like to read it stuff. I just like to read it on the fly because you get my legit reaction. I think you guys are onto something here. The East, West, North, and South. 2 XFL locations, 3, the New Jersey Generals, they move. The Guardians stay in New York because, the NFL has 2 football franchises in New York. So I would assume that they're thinking the same thing. I mean, unless the Boston, New York Guardians is the New York Guardians. I don't know. Maybe you move a team to Boston. Or you don't want to be in Philly. Maybe you go up a little bit. Maybe they throw a team in Connecticut, the McMahons. Put the McMahons in Connecticut, change their name. But I think the XFL wants those bigger markets. But having a team, having both leagues play, and then with 1 or 2 interleague games, and then a 4th of July game for a big bowl on the 4th of July, would be fantastic. I love the idea. Dude. Oakland and San Diego not having teams is weird, especially Oakland. Noah says both going to get new teams. I think San Diego is the front runner of getting a potential, or Oakland. Yeah, probably San Diego. Please, San Diego. I've never been there. It'll be fun to go out there to games. Joseph says Vegas Outlaws. Hey, they have a stadium. They could fill it. Ron says, I hope the XFL keeps St. Louis Battlehawks and XFL St. Louis could have 2 leagues, the XFL and NFL, one in the fall, one in the spring. That would be good. Hope XFL expansion in 16 or 18 U.S. cities later, plus Canada and Mexico. That's the other thing. If the XFL has 2 teams, I think the XFL should play 8, then expand into Canada and Mexico for season 2, then season 3 have a championship game against the USFL. Ron says St. Louis Battlehawks can play in soccer stadiums in St. Louis. XFL could go to Nashville and play in a soccer stadium. Remember, DC Defenders play in a soccer stadium. The dead YouTuber employees. Oh, my goodness. Let's see. He says, he's got it all listed out. Let's see if he's even close. This was 2 days ago. USFL West, San Francisco Padres, San Diego Warriors, Portland Supersonics, Denver Blues, USFL East, New Jersey Raptors, Louisville Redbirds, Birmingham Iron, Houston Grizzlies, XFL West, Seattle Rangers, Anaheim Oilers. Okay. Get out of here. Not very creative, but okay. I'll give you a like. Oh my gosh, there's like 1,000 team names in here. Elf East, Sporting Sofia, Rams Istanbul. Okay. Oh my goodness. That's crazy stuff. All right, my friends, we got some emails here. First, Mr. 32 says, Mark, well, we have good spring football news. It's good for XFL News Hub. Yes, it's been very good. This should generate interest for your sites. Woods, as a president of Football Ops, Johnson, Pereira, Hartman, all these guys. Doesn't look like they are messing around. Good team. It is a good team. I'd like to see some more football experience. But, you know, Brian Woods has got the football. I mean, he put on the spring league during you know what. If he's got the goods to take it to the next level, we shall see. Hopefully it pays people. On the XFL front, the question is what will become of it with the USFL? Lots to look forward to as we head into the fourth season of spring football, AAF. Then we had the XFL, the TSL, and USFL. Thoughts? Yeah. Great question, Mr. 32. I'm super excited. This is kind of the culmination of this is like the building of all this stuff coming to a culmination. I wouldn't be surprised. The more I'm kind of like going through all this stuff, the more I'm thinking that they are going to merge at some point. And the Fox wanted to in now and to get things going. Now remember, Brian Woods has said they would never merge with the XFL. But to have these two leagues, but we didn't hear anything that these two sides were talking. But you know they've had to talk. Don't, like I've said 1,000 times on this show, if those two teams move in the XFL, then it's game on. The fact that you have North, South, East, and West, you could set this up that they could potentially play each other. And I think that would help both leagues. But still, they're still competing to try to beat each other. So I'm not really sure how that will work on there. He also says those markets make up, talking about the cities, those markets make up 16% of the Nielsen TV households, a bit short of my own guess of 17 to 20% that they target, but not so much. For perspective, the AAF was just 9+%. The XFL 2.0 was 22%. It's only geographically Midwest, South, Central to East Coast also. Could see USFL expand west in 2023 to 2024, even with XFL. They have not. Yeah, they're kind of sticking in a central location and seeing how it goes. You got two business plans going head to head to see who is going to be the king of football. Matt says, won't believe tryouts for the USFL. I'm currently going for the European League, but would love to stay in the States if possible. I have not heard anything about tryouts for the USFL. I heard maybe they might do some kind of camps or something. But again, these guys, it is November 22nd, 2021, and time is running out because they need to basically go to camp in March. December, January, February, March. That's 4 months. They need to bring everybody to camp. I don't know if they'll have time, a big runway to do kind of tryouts. The XFL, if they make their announcements in January, February with coaches and talk about summer programs, to have tryouts and those kind of things, I always tell people your best bet is Hub Football if you want to get involved with that. All right, my friends, let's listen to one of our phone callers, shall we?
Curious. Yeah, I was just curious. We're in St. Louis, and my parents got season tickets, name on the plaque, like the whole 9 yards. And I was just curious if they were going to be offered the same seats or if there was any way you can figure out that info. Thank you.
All right. So all right, are we back? I think we're back. We have a little issue there. I think things are streaming all right. Let me know in the chat if we lost anything, but I think we're back. To answer your question, we are running into, I think, I would assume that they're going to give first dibs back to everybody, and everything will be fine there. That when the league returns, they will reach out to season ticket holders first. Because remember, they tried to make sure that the season ticket holders were made whole before they, making sure everybody got their money back. So I think that they will make sure that season ticket holders will be whole before they get that. So you could be back there. So hang tight, see what happens with that. Let's check out some other, what else do we got here? Emailer. Let's see here. Carrie says, the USFL cities are none of the cities I said to put teams in. They will be playing in empty stadiums, and the people at the games will be getting comp tickets, devaluing the tickets the very first year, and it's all downhill from there. Way too hard to get noticed in those cities, costs way too much, got to find diamond cities in the rough. I think he's talking about all these cities would be great. There's just so much into trying to get these leagues off the ground. Yeah, that's a problem with the hub city is, is Alabama going to be able to have multiple, 4 games a week and sell out that stadium? No, but I think the big test will be if the Stallions do well. So technically it's 7 away teams and 1 will always have a home game. So will the Birmingham Stallions put up good numbers? That is the question. Will they get a lot of fans in the seats? Because, all these other games, are people going to go? People going to go to a couple games in a row? That pub piece will be interesting. David says, hey, Mark, I'm basking in the glow of the champagne silver and purple with Carolina blue accent. Okay. But I want to ask, one of the big critiques I've seen online is with Brian Woods' involvement. Yes, Mike Mitchell talked about that. Why is his presence such an eggplant emoji killer for some? They act like he's a flim-flam artist when all I see is a modestly successful TSL creation in his background. True. What don't I know? Do you think the apprehension is justified, or is our spring football family of fans just suffering PTSD and scared of any possible pianos falling from the sky on us? Stay awesome, my friend Dave. Checking in. Dave, yes. Well, the problem is that there's been stuff about, making a lot of promises he couldn't keep, TSL running out of money, making people, charging people different rates, and just kind of financial issues all throughout the Spring League's history. The Spring League has never been looked at as legit as it is because it's been on television. I mean, you're going back to when the XFL was testing things out with the Spring League. I had heard not the greatest things there. And it's mostly just broken promises and I'm going to pay you and then never paying and not having money, that kind of thing. And it's expensive to run a spring football league and any kind of these football league operations. Hub football, which does, doesn't have games but has practices, they haven't had run. I haven't heard anything negative about hub football when it comes to these kind of things. So that's been the issue with the spring league. But again, it's so expensive to run these leagues. But he does have a lot of experience. This is his chance to kind of shine. Was it a startup issue? And now that stuff is resolved? Or, what is... He's got a chance to prove himself. And part of me thinks that he could do that. And the other part of me thinks that there could be a potential that they're just kind of using him for the first year or so because he's got so much experience of doing a hub city. He's one of the few people that know how to run a hub football city. Get him and they've been with him for the last year or two. So they know, Fox knows what they're getting in with him. So clearly they think he's valuable to the team, and he's in there, and it's been his quotes out there. So we'll have to see when it comes to Brian Woods and what's going on there. On to the chat on Facebook. Josh says, I still would love to see if it was possible for the XFL or USFL could buy the rights to any teams from the AAF and resurrect those fan bases. That would be kind of cool. Take one of the Tampa teams and move it to Orlando. If the AAF showed anything that the Orlando had, I think Tampa Bay Vipers is moving to Orlando. Player salary, Richard's asking. We don't know about that. And that's the thing, is $50 million could go pretty quick. If you're talking 8 teams, what is the XFL willing to spend on player talent? Michael says, I would love to see the USFL have the same kickoff and double pass rule. It would be better than the NFL. In the future, Albuquerque would be a better place for a USFL team than LA. It's a small city, but it's a special place for events. Yeah, maybe. On to the YouTube, our friends on YouTube. Ashley says, to me, all the logos are ugly. Yikes. That's not nice. Gregory says, in addition to Protective Stadium, BHM has Legion Field also. They figured in that decision to do the bubble there. That is very true. Yes, Legion Field is part of that as well. How are you going to sell these games? I mean, you're going to have 40 games. You have enough fans. I mean, you're not going to sell out these games, and maybe you'll have 1,000 people. Like, what kind of gate are they thinking about making when it comes to that stuff? I'm going to travel down. I mean, that would be crazy to go to 4 football games. I would do it. I would be kind of tired after that. So we'll see how that kind of plays out. But yeah, the hub season is good in some respects and bad in others. We'll have to see how it all turns out. Alfred says the stars and general logos were changed. Those are not the original logos, unfortunately. Alfred says Stallions look like the CFL Baltimore Stallions from years ago. And that's good, though. USFL North and South. XFL East and West. Yes, that's what I was saying. Gregory says Oakland Invaders, Los Angeles Express, Arizona Wranglers, Denver Gold, San Antonio Gunslingers, Oklahoma Outlaws, Chicago Blitz, Orlando Renegades, Washington Federals. Huang says, Greg says, rookie _X4. Time is ticking for USFL. They still need to hire coaches and sign players. This is true as well, my friends. All right, it's been a good show. We lost stream for a second there, but we're able to get back and back in operation, which is good. Remember, if you want to be part of the show, email podcast@XFL News Hub with your thoughts and MP3s, or record an MP3 or video on your phone, and we'll play it on next week's show. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We will read it on the show. Stitcher, Audible, Player FM, Google Podcasts, Spotify, of course, Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review. Helps us out a ton. And remember to like and subscribe to this channel. You can watch us XFL Week in Review live at 8 p.m. every Monday, right before Monday Night Football. You're on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. Remember, if you like football, then like this channel. Subscribe to this channel and like this channel. And do us a favor. This helps with the YouTube algorithm. Get the word out about the USFL. Get the word out about XFL. And give us a like. Smash that like button now if you're watching. It will really help spread the word about this show. And the show's been doing really great the last couple of weeks because of you guys, and appreciate you coming on. And you're excited. You're definitely excited. I would say the fan base is excited, but apprehensive, because we were burned by the AAF, excited about the XFL, then you know what happened. And now the USFL is coming back, but it's in a hub city, so it's not as cool as if I can go and get season tickets. And frankly, there's no merch to buy yet. Hopefully they'll have the merch of my team, and I will buy that, and when it comes in, maybe that's when I'll announce it. But there's no merch. You just announced teams. Your merch shop should be ready to rock and roll with all sorts of merch for people to buy. Maybe it is now. I don't know. I'll check it after this show is complete. All right, that's it, my friends. Thanks for joining us, as always. I did watch the 30 for 30 USFL talk thing. That was pretty interesting. I mentioned that last week that I watched that was pretty good. So check that out if you're interested in some USFL history. That was pretty good as well. All right, that's it, my friends. Thanks for hanging with us. Remember, I'm trying to find my little closing script. Where the heck is it? Did I delete it? I might have deleted it. I can't find it anywhere. Where is my little closing script? I don't think I have it. All right, you know the drill. That's it for Movie Folks. Thanks for watching. God bless, my friends, and I will see you all later next week. Enjoy your Thanksgiving vacation, holidays. Oh, and be good with your family. Have fun with your family. Be safe out there. God is good. Love you guys. Peace. See you later.